Hey, what's up, Schmoizecord? I'm here, Bixie, the greatest lurker. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Candy Falls with its chocolate river and Pat Fusty, who is in it for some reason. Today we're going to be showing you guys the best crosspaths for every monkey. I know you guys have been recently getting into the game, and I wanted to make this video to help you guys out. So let's get right ahead and start. So we got our Dart Monkey, right? With this top path, Juggernaut and Ultra Juggernaut, you're going to want to usually go with the middle cross path because it usually helps more to have the attack speed over the range, and you can always just get camo detection from the village, but you can't always get extra attack speed in the same way. But if you don't have access to camo detection or a village or anything like that, go the bottom path, because then you'll be able to pop those camo balloons. Moving on to this dude, we got our Plasma Monkey Fan Club Tier 5, and this one you're usually going to want to go the bottom path, because then he'll get camo detection when he uses his ability, right? And I don't think the Pierce shouldn't matter for the ability. It only adds like 1 or 2, but the extra range and damage is going to be really useful, especially with that Plasma Monkey Fan Club. Now next up we got our Crossbow Master. The Crossbow Master, the two crosspaths actually function similarly when the Pierce is maxed out, and I have a knowledge here that lets me get 2 of these tier 5s. You can't usually do that. But like in situations where Pierce isn't as important, the Crossbow Master with the middle path does better, so you're usually just going to want to go with the middle path. Alright, for Boomerang, we got our top path, we got our Glaive Lord, and it's basically this path. It's all dependent on what you're trying to do and what you're using the tower for. If you're not going for the tier 5, it's usually better to go for the middle path because of the higher rate of attack speed, but it's really not that much better than the bottom one because the bottom one lets you do double damage and pop leads. So it all just strategy dependent. But for the top path, if you're going for the top path, you're definitely going to want to get the bottom path every time because then those rings do an extra damage and it'll allow you to pop DDTs in the late game, and this guy can be really good against DDTs. Alright, so our permacharge here. This tower is also really dependent on what you're trying to do with it. If you're using it as a more general popping power, you're going to want to go at the top because it lets you have more pierce. Because the base tower, if you don't buy that upgrade, has like 3 pierce, and that's really bad, especially in late game when you're going to use this dude. But if you're using this dude for mostly Moab and single target damage, you're going to want to go to bottom path for that extra 1 damage from the red hot rings. That damage will let you do pretty much double damage to all the balloons you're attacking, but without that pierce. So very situationally dependent. Now this last dude, the Moab Domination, you might assume that it's going to be the middle path because it'll knock them more back, but the top path actually does more knockback and allows it to have more pierce. And that's really important, especially in those later rounds when you have lots of Moab balloons coming in on like round 98 or round 94, those types of rounds. But if you're using it for the DDT rounds, you're probably going to want to go with the middle path, cross path, because then it doesn't rely on pierce as much, and the extra knockback won't be too consequential because of how fast they're moving. Alright, Bomb Shooter. We got our top path Bomb Shooter. Now the Ninja Kiwi tried to make the bottom path a good cross path for this tower, because if you can see here, it doesn't actually say it there. But here on the 4th tier, it says frags. This path actually buffs the frags as it goes down, but I still think that it's worth it to go to the middle path for the extra attack speed because of the nature of the tower. It's like meant to stun, so it'll be able to stun faster. Alright, so our middle path really isn't too important since you're going to be using this the majority of the time for the ability instead of the attack itself. But if you're going to do a mauler, I would suggest doing the top path if you're in late game, or the bottom path if you're in early and mid game. Because the bottom path is a more general popping power with the frags allowing it to do a little bit of grouped popping power, but the top path gives it that extra pierce it needs to deal with those grouped Moabs. And last but not least, we got our bottom path. Basically, this one is really important on what you're planning to do with the tower. If you're going to only upgrade it to tier 4, go with that top path upgrade, because then it does 2 layers of damage, and all those recursive bombs do an extra damage, and it's much better than that 50% attack speed or however much that is. But if you're going to go all the way to the 5th tier, at the 5th tier, the Bomb Blitz actually does more damage, and so the attack speed is going to stack better, and that 1 extra damage is going to be less consequential. So it all just depends on what your plan is for that tower. And so we're on the bomb. We got our tack shooter. So basically, we got first top path tack shooter, our Ring of Fire Inferno Ring Tower. So basically, it might seem like you want to go with the longer range attacks, but the more attacks and even more attacks actually gives the Inferno Ring more damage. I don't know if it says it in here. Yeah, it says it right there. It gives it more damage, so then every time the balloons get damaged from the ticks of the Inferno Ring, it'll take more damage, and that's actually better than the range in 99% of the situations. And so our middle path isn't too important. Honestly, it all depends on the map. But if you're doing a harder map, I would go for the faster shooting. But if you're on an easier map with more like curves and places to hit the balloons, the bottom path has more blades, and I feel like that's better. But for the most part, you're really only using this tower for the ability. The actual attack, especially in the mid to late game, is really not very consequential. Alright, now last but not least, we got our tack zone. Now tack zone, every time you're going to want to go this faster shooting and even faster shooting, because it makes it so much better. Like, it tacks at probably at least double the speed as the normal one, and while the middle path actually gives it 1 plus pierce and range, you can get that pierce from other places. Like, you got your primary training village, and that'll give it the pierce and range that it needs, but you can't give it the extra attack speed that it gets from that cross path. So always, 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 if you're going bottom path, buy that top cross path. Alright, we got our Ice Monkey. So for the top path Ice Monkey, you can really go either way. Because the top path doesn't really use an attacking power, it's more useful for its debuff, the Super Brittle. And so if you want the range so it'll hit more balloons, go for that. If you want it to attack faster so it applies the buffs more frequently, go for that. But either way, it's always going to be a solid choice, whatever you pick. Now we got our middle path. So middle path, we got our Snowstorm. And if you're just going to buy the Arctic Wind, I would definitely recommend buying bottom path, because it'll allow it to attack much faster and actually refreeze the balloons, which it can't do. Well, actually, probably go top path, because you're using it to slow and not actually attack, and the permafrost will make the balloons much slower for your other defenses to pop. But especially if you're going for the Snowstorm or Absolute Zero, by the permafrost, because that applies it to not only the balloons, it freezes from the ability from the Moabs, which this base tower can't do. And it makes them like 20 to 40% slower. I'm not sure of the exact rate, but it's definitely good. So you're going to want to go for that every time. Alright, now we got our bottom path here. So this one is also, it could go either way. So the benefit of Enhanced Freeze, right, it attacks faster. That's the whole point of that upgrade, right? Attacks faster and freezes for longer. But the permafrost upgrade and the lead popping power, the cold snap, is going to be really good, especially since this upgrade actually lets it pop camo balloons, and it also lets the 5th tier icicle impale the DDTs, which is really what you're going to be using this guy for. But if you have access to the MIB and you're going to be using MIB for your other towers, go the middle path cross path, because then it'll be able to attack DDTs regardless. Alright, Glue Gunner. We got our top path Glue Gunner. This one is also really dependent on what you're doing with your tower. If you're only going to tier 4 or lower with your top path, you're going to want to go the Glue Splatter upgrade, because, like, obviously, if you go the bottom one, it can only glue one balloon at a time, and that's not really what this guy is used for. You got to pop those grouped balloons, you know. But if you're going for the top path all the way to 5th tier, and you have a really good defense outside of that, you're going to want to go to bottom path, because this dude on his own actually has like a lot of pierce. I think it's like 4,000 or something like that, so you're not going to need the glue splatter to get all the balloons. And then you get the stronger glue and longer lasting glue benefits from it. And then the middle path glue, always, you're probably going to want to go this upgrade. Especially if you're using this to damage the Moabs and get that extra damage factor from the glue effect. Because it won't actually coat the Moabs if it doesn't have corrosive glue. It'll only affect the balloons, which isn't really useful, especially in the late game when it's mostly Moabs being spawned. Alright, so our bottom path. I don't really use this bottom path very much, the super glue. It's not that great of a tower, so just go with that if you're doing super glue, but what you're really going to want to be using this tower for is the Moab Glue. This Moab Glue is one of the best best support towers in the game. It allows Moabs to be slowed by 33%, which is really good, especially in chimps runs on hard and expert maps. And for this, you're going to want to go to the bigger globs at least. Sometimes if you're trying to save money, that's enough because there's not as many balloons. There's not as many Moab balloons tightly packed in, so he can coat them all, especially if they're slow moving. But if you have a lot of them, like if you're getting down to those lot of Moabs on round 98, you can go the glue splatter, and that will actually get them all coated. But it all just depends on what you're doing. That's the case with a lot of these towers. Alright, sniper. So our top path sniper, for sure if you're only getting like that much, go the bottom path because the shrapnel's not very helpful. And you can always get camo detection from somewhere else. But if you're going to go to the 4th tier or even the 5th tier, always go this path, because the shrapnel shots, it'll actually do this exact same stun that the main attack has, which allows it to hit multiple of the Moabs at once, which ends up being much better than the faster attack speed. Alright, this guy, he's interesting, because like the best path for him changes like once every update for some reason, because they like balance changes and stuff, but at the current time of making this video, the bottom path is a little bit better, because once you upgrade this dude to 4th tier, he gets lead popping power, so the full metal jacket isn't as necessary, and it just attacks faster, which makes it more convenient. Attack speed is always helpful. Alright, now our bottom path, we got this dude. Now, I know a lot of you guys are coming from 5, where your initial thought is by the top path, because then it does 7 damage per shot to the Moabs. But you're actually going to want to go to the shrapnel shot, and yes, the sniper only does 2 damage, but the shrapnel does 5 per. And so it can hit grouped balloons, and it has a lot of pierce. Well, not a lot of pierce, but it has some pierce, which is really good for the sniper because of how fast it attacks, which makes this a good all-around popping power instead of just the high health Moab popping power. And he actually pops the Moabs faster if there's more than 2 of them. So the middle path cross path is good in literally every scenario except for a single balloon. Alright, well that's snipers. So we got our submarines now. So top path submarine, if you're using him for damage, you're usually going to want to go with our bottom path. If you need him to pop leads, like absolutely necessary that he pops leads, go ahead and go for that middle path, because he can't do it without it, and then it turns a really ugly red. I hate that tower, but if you need the popping power, do that. Now our 5th tier of this guy, he's not really used as an attack tower, though he is pretty good as an attack tower, but his main use is for the ability cooldowns and also hero leveling that he provides. So it's not too important if you're using him for that purpose. Alright, so now we got... Wait, not Buccaneer yet. Okay, we got our middle path submarine. Now our middle path submarine, most of the time, you're going to want to do the bottom path, because then he gets those... Actually, no, they changed that. Scratch that. You're going to want to go top path, depending on the map. If it's a longer map, go the advanced intel route, because then he can attack from the whole screen, right? Like, he can get over here and over here and over here if you have towers over there. But if it's a shorter map, you're going to want to go to that bottom path, because the airburst starts. It's more local around the submarine, but there's not a whole lot of other room around it. Yeah, and if you're going for the top path, don't worry about it too much, because the ability isn't affected by it and the preemptive strike isn't affected by it, so it doesn't really matter then. Now we got our bottom path with the sub commander. Always advanced intel, no matter what. The extra pierce, it's 2 pierce, it's great, but this dude at tier 5 and even tier 4 gets extra pierce anyway, and that global range is like so much better than the 2 pierce will ever be, and you can always just pop leads with something else. Lead popping power isn't too important to this guy, especially when you're trading off that global range. Alright, so Buccaneer now. So Buccaneer, the top path is actually dependent on what you're doing. If you're going to have something to reveal camo balloons like a village, go the middle path, because the buff that the carrier flagship, the extra damage, applies to the grapes, and that can be a lot of extra DPS for your tower. But if you don't have camo detection or just don't have it in range or something like that, go the bottom path, because then this tower can see camo, and it can also, the 5th tier can pop leads by itself, so it's not too important for that popping power. But yeah, this path is just really dependent. Alright, so this guy, the Monkey Buccaneer, the Monkey Pirates, it's very Like, you can technically go both ways, but I usually just go the bottom path because the extra range makes him better, and the benefits you get from the top path aren't a lot, especially from the cannons. They only get slightly faster attack speed, and you're going to be really using this guy for his ability, the Moab Takedown, which isn't affected by the crosspath, so you might as well get the one with camo detection, because that helps you. It's better for normal gameplay, because it'll let him attack camo instead of needing to get it from an outside source. Alright, so this guy, the bottom path, it doesn't matter. His only purpose is to get money, so if you want to use him as an attacking tower, get the grape shot, but it's really not that important. That's not what you're going to be using them for. And it ends up being a waste of money, especially if you get a lot of these. Alright, so now we got our ace. Now this top path, it can actually go either way. The benefit of getting the middle cross path is that the missiles get more pierce and also it gets camo detection. And it does more damage to camos. They added that in the last update. But if you don't want that extra damage to camos because you don't need it or whatever, but you do need pierce on the darts, go the bottom path. And that path will allow it to pop much more balloons with its main dart attack, but it might not get as much pops from its missile attack. And also it allows you to do center path, which is better for micro purposes because you can move it around the track. You see this? I can center it around a specific location and then it goes around that location. So if you want that, by the bottom path. If you want the middle path, by the middle path. It's all just dependent on what you're doing. Alright, so now we got our middle path. Now this one isn't too dependent on the cross paths because of his bomb attack is mainly what you're going to be using, and his ability, the Tsar Bomba and Ground Zero, aren't actually affected by it. That's going to be the case with a lot of these ability towers. But if you're going to use like the earlier tiers while you're upgrading this, just go with the top path because it's generally more convenient and reliable than the bottom path is, even with the micro capabilities. Alright, so now we got our Spectre Plane. Spectre Plane I like a lot, and I usually go for the top cross path and then give it camo detection later. But this can cause problems if you don't really have that accessible to you. But the problem with buying the camo upgrade is you lose out on that third tier's popping power because it doesn't get the double attack speed or the extra darts, which can make it a much worse tower in the early to mid game while you're saving up for that Spectre. Alright, so now we've got our helicopters. Top path helicopter, it's really dependent on what you're going for. The faster jets and IFR are good if you're wanting to do the tower as a solo tower, not necessarily giving it a lot of buffs, because then he doesn't need camo detection. He's got all his popping powers covered. But if you want to do him as more of a DPS tower with lots of buffs, definitely go for the bottom path. Now this guy, he attacks faster. You can see the faster firing upgrades, and then you can give him an outside camo detection like a village or whatever. And then he's pretty much just as good as the middle path cross path would be, except that he doesn't have that faster jet. So he moves a little bit slower, which can cause problems with DDTs, but it's not usually that big of an issue, especially on easier maps. Alright, so this dude, we got our blowback. If you're using this dude as a blowback tower, go for the bottom path. Unless you don't want to micro, then go to the top path. But the bottom path, the faster firing actually affects the blowback by making it blow balloons back at a faster rate. If you're going for the Chinook or special operations, it's not too important since they don't really get affected much from the cross path. And now we got this bad boy, the Comanche Defense. So for this tower, if you're going to be using the Moab shove a lot, go with the bigger jets and IFR because it actually makes the Moab shove them back faster. But if you're lazy and don't want to micro it as much, go for the top path. But if you really need that extra, if you need the camo detection or that extra Moab shove strength, go for the middle cross path. Alright, mortar. Story of the mortar. Never by bottom. Always by middle. So our top path. Well, actually, sometimes you want to use the bottom path for the. Never mind, scratch that. The top path tower. So it's the biggest one, right? He does like 25 damage per shot, and the faster reload and rapid reload, it'll make him do like really much faster than he was as a base tower. And so cross paths are really important for what you're doing. But the Bernie stuff actually if you buy the Burny stuff for this guy, he attacks slower, but the Burny stuff actually does 25 damage per tick, and it ticks a few times per thing. It's like 1.5 times per second, I believe, that the Burny stuff effect happens. And then it wears off after like 10 seconds. So, but basically the story of this guy is if you're using him as a cleanup tower, a general popping tower, go the middle path. But if you're using this guy as a DPS tower, go the bottom path. Alright, so we got our heavy shells artillery battery. So now this one always this balloon buster. It does an extra damage compared to the Burny stuff, and the Burny stuff really isn't that useful because it doesn't get extra damage, especially in the later game. And it's not even useful when it's at its best in the mid game. You're always going to want to go for this balloon buster because that extra damage and radius of explosion, you see. Alright, so our bottom path dude, if you're going to use him as a camo detection, scratch that. Never use him as a camo detection. It's horrible. So basically this guy, you're only going to want to use him if you're using him as the shattering shells or blue incineration. And so for that, you're going to want to go for the faster reload and rapid reload every time. Because the larger radius doesn't affect the balloon incineration, and it'll allow you to defortify balloons much faster than if you had the larger radius and extra damage. Alright, Dartling. So the story of the Dartling is always middle path. So we've got our top path, right? He shoots the laser, and you're going to want to give him the camo detection and faster barrel spin, because that allows him to attack the balloons much faster. And I know it doesn't really look like this guy has attack speed, but it like sort of pulses, and that attacks it faster, I think. Or maybe the rate of the laser shock goes faster. I don't really remember. All I know is that it's definitely the better path. But for the middle path, the Hydra rockets and MAD, it's really dependent on what you're doing with the tower. If you're using this guy as a general cleanup, Moab cleanup tower, he's really bad against normal balloons. Or if you're using the middle path as a general attacking tower, you're going to want to go with the top path, because the laser shock is really good for getting those last little bits of balloons down, and the aiming capabilities of the tower are much better because of that focused firing. But if you're going to use them as DPS towers, you're going to want to go that bottom path, because the bottom path allows it to pierce through much more balloons than it can on its base form. But it's not real great once it's as a general attacking tower. It's a really bad cleanup tower. That's the downside of buying the bottom path. So it all just depends on what you're trying to do with it. Now our bottom path tower, the story of the Dartling, always middle path. The top path does not give it camo detection, which this guy, he's just horrible without it, and without the faster barrel spin. He doesn't attack nearly as fast, and that makes him a much worse tower and a much worse option. So always that faster barrel spin. Alright, on to our magic monkeys. First up, we got the Arcane Spike and Archmage upgrades. So for this, you're going to want to go Intense Magic Monkey Sense every single time, because the Intense Magic makes it pierce through a lot more balloons and actually move a lot faster, his main projectile. And the camo detection, he gains that camo detection. And the trade-off is actually better compared to the fire upgrades, because they aren't buffed by any of his later upgrades like Archmage or Arcane Spike. And it just ends up being not worth it compared to the extra pierce and projectile speed that the Intense Magic offers. Alright, so for this guy is actually pretty interesting, the middle path. So if you buy the top path, he can actually aim his fire wherever he wants. And he can go through the barriers, like you can see the house here. The guided magic actually lets it go through those obstacles. He can shoot through them. So if you need to do that, it's a better path probably. But if you're in most cases, you're going to want to go the bottom path, the monkey sense abilities, because then he gets that intense magic, which actually boosts the fire, which makes it have more pierce, especially that wall of fire right there, and that's really, really good, especially with all the nerfs it's received lately. And then it'll just have camo detection, which is always good. And then once you get up to here, it's not too important, but it's still benefited more from the bottom path compared to the top path. And we got our Prince of Darkness. Now, it used to be better to get the middle path, because it allowed you to build up your graveyard faster, but they actually buffed the guided magic arcane blast path. And I don't really remember how they buffed it. I'm not also not sure which one is better, but either way, just go with whatever's working for your strategy. If you need the Wall of Fire to defend and it's being helpful and getting up your graveyard like you need it, go for that. If you need the Arcane Blast for more targeted specific pops, go for that. All just depends. Alright, your Super Monkey. So the Super Monkey, this top path is really interesting. If you're usually going to only get the third tier for this in most games, and the best option for that is usually the knockback Ultravision, because the trade-off from the extra range isn't as good as the knockback, because the knockback allows him to be in the range more and do more damage to those balloons, and it's especially useful when it knocks back Moabs, and then all your other towers can attack it for more periods of time, which makes him a really good option. And the range just isn't as useful as the Ultravision. And if you have the knowledge, this Ultravision will actually let your Super Monkey see through obstacles. Just like that, you see that red turn to gray. So if that's your situation, this dude is extra important to get that bottom path. Now if you're going to go for the Sun Temple, it's also dependent, because the temple, you're not going to be wanting to use that knockback a whole lot. But if you're dealing with mostly balloons that aren't bads, like ZOMGs, the knockback is useful, but in most cases you're going to want to go with the range. Because just look how good that is. It can attack basically everywhere with that. And it's just the trade-off compared to the knockback and Ultravision is not as good, because you can always just buff that guy. And if you're buying this guy, you can definitely afford a camo buff. That dude's like 500,000. Alright, so we got our bottom path. Now this dude, I feel like the best choice is always to go with this dude, the Plasma Monkey Crosspath, because it allows it to do much more damage to Moabs. And it actually has a little more Pierce, I think, unless they removed that last update. They did something with the Pierce. Either way, by that path, it does more damage and the range is not useful. And for this upgrade, also much better to have the Plasma. And this dude, it doesn't matter, his Dark Knight ability doesn't affect it. Alright, so we got Ninja Monkey now. So for this Ninja Monkey, always seeing Shuriken and Caltrops. And I usually don't even buy the Caltrops because it doesn't really help out that much for the defense. But the Seeking Shuriken is so much better than the Distraction and Counter Espionage upgrades, because it allows the tower to seek out balloons automatically, and that gets really crucial once he gets as many projectiles as he does with his 4th and 5th tiers. Those 5 and 8 projectiles are like really unruly if they don't have the Seeking Shuriken, and that is very essential, especially in your late game rounds. Alright, so our middle path. Our middle path is an interesting one. I usually don't even buy Crosspaths on this guy, since it's mostly a buff tower, but if you're trying to get the Shinobi Tactics buff, and your other Ninja Monkey isn't in range, buy the Ninja Discipline to get him in that last little bit of range. And then for the ability, it doesn't do anything, so don't worry about it. And then we got our Sticky Bomb Master Bomber. So for this one, you're just going to want to go top path. And I don't even usually buy the Sharp Shurikens like I did there, because it doesn't really matter. It's just 2 Pierce on the main Shuriken attack, which isn't that good, especially when you're going to be using this guy in late game against the Moabs. But that Ninja Discipline makes him attack faster, so we can throw bombs at a faster rate, which is really important, and it's really the better cross path compared to the Distraction, which doesn't really play a huge role in late game when you're going to be using this guy. Alright, for our Alchemist, this buff Alchemist is really dependent on the number of towers you're going to be buffing. If you're buffing 2 or less, you're going to want to buy the Perishing Potions upgrade, because the ability lasts for longer, and he can reapply the buff faster. And this is, of course, if you're not going for the Permabrew. If you're going for the Permabrew, always go for the bottom path, because he can throw potions to all the monkeys faster. But if you're buffing 3 or more towers with the 4 zeros, the 4th tier Alchemist, then always go for this path, because he throws the potions faster, and the distribution of buffs will be better compared to the middle path. Alright, let's get rid of these guys. Alright, so Alchemist, we got our middle path here. So middle path is usually going to be used for its unstable concoction, attack, which coats Moabs in a substance that explodes when they get popped, and that's really what you're gonna be using this guy for. The ability is okay, but I don't use it a whole lot. It doesn't have many applications. So you're gonna want to go the faster throwing for this, because it actually throws the unstable concoction much faster this way, and the increased pierce doesn't affect it from the top cross path, so just buy the bottom path. And then you don't even need the acid pool, it doesn't do much. And the transforming tonic, it's not too important if you're going for that one, since it doesn't affect the actual ability, and the main attack outside of the ability isn't that great anyway. But it does use the unstable concoctions, which is by the bottom path, is better for that, because it'll throw that faster, like I said. Alright, we got our Bloons Master Alchemist, rubber to gold, and that sort of tower. So for this guy, it's not too important what you pick. I think I'm not sure if larger potions affects the actual Bloons Master Alchemist potion, but I always just buy it just in case. But it shouldn't be too important. This guy is always going to be Bloons Master Alchemist. But like, if you're using this guy for lead to gold or rubber to gold, buy the larger potions, because then it can affect more bloons at a time, especially those spaced lead bloons. It can hit them more easily. Our Druid Monkey, the top path, it really doesn't matter. The two different paths have their own strengths and weaknesses, but either one you pick, you're probably going to be fine. Like this guy, he throws more thorns and can get rid of Rego balloons, and the other guy has more range, and he attacks 10% faster. That's what this guy does. Unless you lose lives, then he attacks faster. So it's just personal preference. Try it out. Decide which one you like better. It's the same thing with this middle path guy. Unless you're going to go for the... Actually, no, this guy's paths are important now. So basically, the difference is the hard thorns, it lets his Spirit of the Forest thorns here pop lead balloons and DDTs, which it couldn't do without that, I don't think. Because it's the hard thorns, it says allows it to pop any balloon type. But if you're not worried about DDTs, like if you have a separate tower for that, go the bottom path, because then it'll allow it to spread out the thorns faster. Alright, so farms. So these farms, for if you're going for top path, always this path. The extra cash is much better than whatever bottom path is offering. It's just not even kind of worth it to get bottom path. Never do that. Our middle path guy, this middle path, the bank, always go top path. It'll generate you cash faster. And the bottom path, what it does, it actually tells you when the bank is full so you can reload it better. But it's not worth it in the long run if you're staying on top of your banks, because this guy generates money faster. Alright, your bottom path. Now this guy's kind of tricky actually. So we got our third tier here. And without monkey knowledge, the top path and the bottom path and the middle path actually make the same amount. So always go for top path if you don't have the monkey knowledge. That makes the middle path do more cash. But if you have that, it gets more complicated. Because yes, this middle path one will make you more money, but it's harder to save up for it initially because you're not earning that extra cash from the balloons you get from the greater production upgrades. And it's much harder to get it up to that level. So it all just depends on where you are in the progression of your farming. The first few farms, buy greater production, then move on to those once you get a stable, steady supply of income from the farms. Alright, so we got our spike factories. So this guy, in most cases, you're just gonna want to go the even faster production route, because the bottom path doesn't really give this guy benefits that he needs, because his explosions don't really need to last very long because of how they explode. The bottom path makes the projectiles last for longer and not wear off. But this guy, he's not really useful. It's not useful to him because of the projectiles exploding. I don't know. Just always buy the even faster production. Attack speed always useful. Supermines, buy the even faster production. Except you're never going to be buying Supermines because it sucks. Alright, so this dude actually, if you're going for the third tier by itself, buy the top path because it'll have more damage per spike because of its increased spike capacity. But if you're going for the ability that that fourth tier, it's actually dependent on what you're doing for the map. If it's a longer map, you're going to want to go for the bigger spikes, because it'll, like I said, the spike piles will be bigger because of the upgrades. But if you're on a shorter map, just didn't mean to do that, but if you're on a shorter map, especially ones with multiple paths, you're going to want to do the bottom path, because without it, the ability spreads these spikes onto all the paths, even if balloons aren't going on that path. But this dude, it's not a good map to demonstrate this, but if you use the ability on a map with multiple paths, it'll shoot the spikes to the path where the balloons are only, which allows them to be crammed in more and do more damage. So it just depends on what map you're doing and what your strategies are. Alright, so our bottom path, in most cases you're going to want to go for the faster production, even faster production route, because it shoots out these guys faster, and this is especially useful considering the slow speed of the permaspike and the limited resources of the tier 3 and 4. But the main downside of that is you don't get the lead popping power, but that can be easily fixed with a 200 Alchemist. That's all you need. And then he gets that sitting mixture dip, can pop the DDTs, which is mostly what you're going to be using this guy to pop lead balloons. And so basically, but if you don't have access to that for some reason, like if it's a boss event like Lich and you can't use buffs, go for the top path. But most cases, like 99% of the time, go for the middle path, Crosspath with an Alchemist. Alright, our villages now. Our villages, I'm not going to go over every individual crosspath because it's all just dependent on what you need. If you're going to buy, usually you're just going to buy these two with each other, and then you can go primary training or MIB, whichever route you need more. But the discount village, this guy can be really good, especially if you're buying super monkeys, especially the top path super monkey, because it'll make this upgrade so much cheaper compared to outside of the range. But then the cross paths outside of that aren't too important. So village, just buy whatever you need. Don't worry about cross paths. And our engineer, our last monkey to go. So basically this dude, the top path, he gets our sentry expert and paragon sentry. Oh, sentry champion. I call it paragon sentry still. They changed the name. But basically this path, it makes him and the sentries have more range, and the deconstruction actually gives them a 1+ attack damage. Now that it comes at the cost of actually losing extra pierce from the oversized nails and the pin effect from the pin upgrade, which is better for mid-game but kind of falls off in late game because it doesn't affect the ceramics. But it all just depends on what you're using them for. If you need the pierce, go the bottom path. If you need the damage, go the middle path. So yeah, just whatever you need that tower to do. Alright, so for our middle path, the foam, right, we gotta, if you're using the foam, which I don't usually use, go for the bottom path, because it actually gives the foam more pierce. If you're going the overclock, it doesn't matter. The ability isn't affected by cross paths since it's just a buff for other towers. Okay, you die. Alright, and last tower, our bottom path. So basically, if your bottom path shoots out this dude, the coffin, into a good spot, you're going to want to go the top path, because that allows it to actually reshoot the coffin thing faster than if you buy the middle path. But the benefit of the middle path is actually that it allows you to place the coffin wherever you want. So you can aim it like that, like with this little thingy. And that's good if it's in like a bad spot or where you don't want it, or if you want to micro it. But either way, it's just dependent on what you want to do. Alright, so that's all the towers, I think. We did it. We went over all the cross paths. Now, if I see you using the wrong cross paths after watching this video, I'm going to yell at you because you should know better. Alright, bye guys.